Hello, this is Shambhavi. Welcome to Satsang. Satsang is an ancient spiritual practice from India. It means being in reality together. I give Satsang live every Wednesday and Sunday night in Portland, Maine. This Dharma talk was recorded during one of our Wednesday night gatherings. Please visit jayakula.org to learn more about the teachings. You can find video satsangs on Jayakula's YouTube channel, and my books are all available on Amazon.com. Much love to you, wherever and however you are. In a lot of spiritual traditions, you start at the beginning. You start with some idea or some explanation or some practice or some ritual that is for beginners. Seems logical. In this tradition and all other tantric traditions from India, Vajrayana traditions and direct realization traditions like Dzogchen, we start at the end. We start at the end because if we don't know the end, we don't know where we're going. So we start with a taste, or what's called an introduction, to our real nature or essence nature. There are many, many words for this. Presence, flowing presence, God, reality, instant presence, nature and mind. There's so many names. We start with the end so that we know where we're going, and we do that every time we sit down to do practice. So in all seated practice in this kind of tradition, when we sit down, the first thing we do is generally something to remind us of where we're going. And then we try to work with that. And all of these practices of the end are called transmission. So this is the most important thing in this kind of tradition. The most important thing is that you are doing practices with correct view of those practices and with a teacher who can introduce you to the fruit of the practice before you actually do the practice, so that you can go into whatever practices you're learning, like meditation and mantra and so forth, having some feeling for, not just a conceptual idea of, because anybody can get a conceptual idea. You don't need a teacher for that. You can just read a book or Google it or something. But so that you can go into your practice with an actual taste of or feeling for the result. Now, it's likely not going to be a very deep feeling or deep experience of the result, but it'll be enough so that you have a beacon. And in order to be able to recognize introduction or transmission, either through the teacher or through certain preliminary practices you're given to do, your senses have to be a little more subtle. And you have to be looking for subtlety. I read a bit of yet another article about how meditation lowers your blood pressure and helps you with your glucose levels and stuff like that. Even in my Diksha lineage, where I got this Saraswati name, there was a lot of trying to correlate Western science and these practices to make them more palatable for Western students. But the actual purpose of these practices that I teach is to recognize the nature of yourself and the nature of reality in an experiential way. And having recognized that, to immerse yourself in that experience and remain immersed in that experience so that you can have freedom of expression unconditioned by all of the tensions that now are limiting you. This is called self-realization, right? Self-realization. You realize the nature of the self. You realize the nature of yourself. We all want to do that in some way or another, or you wouldn't be here. I mean, we all have questions about who am I, but usually those questions are not as thoroughgoing or not meant to go so deep as actually to become self-realized. Generally, people want a slightly more ordinary answer to that question. And maybe it has revolves around something like, what should I do with my life? What kind of career should I have? Who am I? What is my purpose in the sense of what should I do? But this kind of spiritual practice is asking, who am I? Meaning down to the fundament of who am I in an existential sense? Who is everyone? Right? What is reality? What is the nature of the self, the nature of reality? So when we ask those questions in an embodied way by doing spiritual practice, then we are actually putting ourselves in a situation where we aren't going to get an intellectual answer to that question. We're going to get an experiential answer to that question. Now that all sounds maybe somewhat interesting, but the problem is that in order to answer that question experientially, you have to give up your tensions. And when we say tension, we mean karma, something like different patterns that are governing your experience, including your concept right now of who you are, and your concept of other people, and concepts of right and wrong, and good and bad, and true and false, and concepts about how things should be and how they shouldn't be, and how your life should look and how it shouldn't look, and all of those things. So the rub is, as they say, that it's very difficult and a bit scary to divest yourself of all of those conceptual ways of being in the world. Because right now, most of you think that those ideas you have about things are who you are. So if you give them up, you're basically giving up you. Those of you who choose to actually tread this path, that is what you're signing up for. And the rewards of this are absolutely unfathomable. Because, of course, we can't really imagine fully what it's like to live outside of the cage of the little you that you've cobbled together with all of these constructs and thoughts about life and yourself. And in fact, you're just holding on to a lot of them very tightly. And the thought of walking out of that cage, like when they take elephants or other intelligent animals that have been locked up in zoos their whole lives, and then they take them to a refuge, at first they're afraid to come out of the cages. Right? They're not used to so much open space. Because we're talking about a tremendous amount of openness that comes when we're just being here with nothing other than our senses and our intelligence. So that's what it's really about. And sometimes we go to practice with communities, well-established various communities, Buddhist or Hindu or whatever they are. And because we're starting at the beginning rather than the end, we don't really know what we're signing on for. Now, you may think, well, that's for the best, because then maybe I'll slowly get tricked into actually waking up. And it will be less scary if I start at the beginning and take little baby steps and go along without really knowing what it is that I've signed on for. And that's fine. I think that works for some people, right? For sure. But this kind of tradition is, attracts people who kind of like to get thrown into the deep end. Every tradition has people that it is for, people that tradition is designed to meet, is designed to provide a home for. And this tradition, although Jayakula itself as an organization there's lots of different kinds of people here in all different kinds of conditions, some of whom want to be part of this tradition and some of whom just like to hang out. I mean, that's fine, whatever anybody wants. But those who get more deeply involved are people who generally feel some sense of excitement about the idea of not knowing what's going to happen and finding out about life in a deeper way. Sort of a sense of jumping off into the unknown, that kind of adventurous spirit. So this tradition provides plenty of adventure. And one of the ways that it provides adventure is by working with a teacher who is willing to help you to divest yourself of your concepts about life. And so it can become rather rough and tumble. But that only happens if you give permission for that to happen. So never fear. If all of this is sounding terribly unappealing, no one's going to force anything on you, believe me. I wanted to just go back to basics a little bit tonight and talk about what is this tradition for, and what is spiritual practice for from the perspective of this tradition. Because you could say, I mean, for some people, spiritual practice is about lowering their blood pressure or calming them down so they're not mad at their boss at work, or just kind of relaxing a little bit. But as the chaotic noise of the radiator indicates, when you want to actually become free, and when we say freedom, we mean free to express yourself freely, without conditioning, without fear. When you really want to do that, then spiritual practice isn't necessarily so relaxing. Right?
What's the hard part like?
Many different things. Sometimes you can have periods where you feel very connected and you feel how nourishing life is, and your senses feel very alive, and then things just kind of dry up for a while, and then you feel more disconnected and things aren't as juicy as they used to be, and that's hard, right? Especially when you get into sort of the middle period where you're sort of coming and going in and out of greater or lesser contact with presence. That unevenness of experience can be hard. Especially in the beginning, just seeing so much more clearly can be hard. Like seeing yourself more clearly, seeing other people more clearly, seeing how you get entangled with things in an unhealthy way more clearly. That isn't really fun stuff to look at.
Okay, gotcha.
And then, coming up against whatever ideas you've harbored about yourself. There's a great poem by a 14th century yogini from Kashmir where this tradition is from. And she said something like she feels pain from an insight that her teacher had given her that day. I don't remember the exact words of it, but like the sting of having to see something through the mirror of her teacher. So there can be that sense of, like this sharp insight that you get. That's one of the functions of the teacher in the tradition, is to serve as a mirror. And that operates in a lot of different ways. but that mirror can show you lots of different things. Not only your enlightened essence nature, but also the karmas and tensions that you're carrying.
I think that's the part I'm afraid of. But, I mean, that probably means that I need to dive into that more, right?
Well, it doesn't mean there's no logic like that to it.
Okay.
The most important thing is just feeling what you want. Like, the connection to a tradition and a community and a teacher is just through a feeling of rightness or desire. It's not a logic process. Right? It's not, well, if I don't like it, it must be good for me. I mean, maybe it's just not for you. You know, who knows?
Well, I meant like being told about yourself.
Yeah, who likes that? Right?
Exactly.
But that's only one level. If this kind of process is the right process for you, and this isn't the only tradition where this kind of process is what you go through. Like I said, the Vajrayana tradition in Tibet and the Dzogchen tradition and many other traditions, there's this process where you're in a relationship, a mirror-like relationship with a teacher, and things are being shown to you. And I think that even though on one level nobody likes that, on another level, the people that are really right for this kind of tradition absolutely do want it. It may be uncomfortable. You may get upset or pissed off sometimes. You may reject what the teacher shows you sometimes. But ultimately, you actually really do want to be shown and you feel grateful for it. That's, I think, the experience of people for whom these kinds of traditions are the right traditions. Right? Because there's a feeling of wanting to be free of those things that are limiting us. Right? So how can we be free if there's no one there to show us what is weighing us down? Right? We can't see it all by ourselves. We're too attached to certain things, and then there's other things that are very hidden from us, and we need help in general to discover those things, to make them visible so we can begin to divest of them. The fact that we live in a reality where there are people who actually want to help us do that, I mean, really? That's a job somebody wants? It's a occasion for a lot of gratitude, and I mean, that's how I feel about my teachers. Just, wow, somebody actually wanted to help me do this. How weird and wonderful is that? Jayakula is a nonprofit community offering opportunities to learn and practice in the direct realization traditions of Trika Shaivism and Dzogchen. We are based in Portland, Maine and Portland, Oregon. Visit jayakula.org to explore more of our offerings.